The Raspberry Pi 02 single board computer was a considerable upgrade over the original Zero, and it achieved this boost by upgrading the slow single core processor with the much more capable quad core processor from the Raspberry Pi 3. However, with the scarcity of Raspberry Pis available, everyone is looking for alternatives. Here we have the MQ-QUAD from MangoPi, and it's lining up to be a serious alternative to the Raspberry Pi 02. It boasts a quad-core ARM CPU and a gigabyte of DDR3 memory. In this video, we're going to go over the features of the board, benchmark it against the 02, and see if the MangoPi MQ-QUAD is worth your money. In our last video, we looked at the RISC-V powered sibling of this board, called the MQ Pro, and it was an interesting board, but ultimately didn't perform too well. But let's see how the MQ-QUAD stacks up. Welcome to a Learn Embedded Systems video. Be sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with new boards and get notified of our embedded systems tutorials. Firstly, let's take a look at the price of the MangoPi MQ-QUAD. This board is available from a variety of AliExpress sellers. There is only one version of the board, but it is available in different colours. You can get a nice fetching matte black version of the board that I have, or you could go for this dazzling bright pink. Both variants are available for about £23, which is about $28 US. But these prices appear to fluctuate all over the place. I'll leave a couple of purchase links down in the description, but always have a look and see if some other sellers are selling the board for a lower price. So anyway, I purchased this board at $23 and it cost me £6 to ship it to the UK. To put this in perspective, if you could get your hands on a Raspberry Pi 2, it would cost you about £17 here in the UK with some cheaper local delivery. Once the board arrived, it came with a couple of extra bits. I obviously got the MQ-QUAD board itself, but I also got a micro UFL patch antenna for the wireless radios, and this is a nice addition because there is an onboard antenna, so they didn't need to include this. There was also a set of coloured header pins and some MangoPi stickers. In terms of form factor, this board is the same as the Raspberry Pi Zero, coming in at 65 by 30mm. The GPIO header pins and connectors are all in the same place, but the primary difference is the switch from micro USB on the Pi to USB-C on the MQ-QUAD. So the board wouldn't be an exact drop-in replacement, but I think that USB-C is a significant upgrade over micro USB. I do admit I am a bit of a micro USB hater. Now let's take a close look at the features of this board. At the core of the MQ-QUAD, we have the Allwinner H616 SoC, and this chip contains 4 ARM Cortex A53 cores, which are clocked at up to 1.5 GHz. These cores are the same as the 4 that are found in the RP3A0 chip on the Raspberry Pi 02 and the Pi 3. However, in the Pi 0, the clock speed of these cores is much lower. It's 1 GHz compared to 1.5. Also on the H616 is a Mali G31 MP2 GPU, which is capable of some light 3D video tasks. Accompanying the H616 chip is 1 GB of DDR3 memory, which is mounted on the rear of the board. The module on my board is an Elpida branded chip. I don't think that this is a new memory module, as Elpida went bust in the early stages of 2012. The product photos on AliExpress show Micron modules, but the description suggests that these chips have been salvaged. I don't know how that will affect the lifespan of the memory. For wireless connectivity, there is both 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi 4 and Bluetooth 4.2 on board. There are 2 versions of the wireless chip used on this board, but both of them use the RTL 8723DS chipset from Realtek. I got the 6223A SRD from FNLink module, but there is also the TL8723DS from TroLink. It appears to be random allocation, but I wouldn't expect any notable performance difference between these 2 chips, as they both use the same Realtek chipset. There is an onboard chip antenna, but there is also a micro UFL connector for connecting an external antenna for better performance. For storage, there is a micro SD card slot, and in terms of connectors, there are 2 USB-C ports, 1 USB host, and 1 on the go. Display is provided through a mini HDMI connector, and there is a 24-pin camera connector, and of course we have the same 40-pin GPIO header as we found on the Raspberry Pi. That is pretty much all of the features of this board. It's quite a straightforward one. In terms of software, MangoPi provides 3 images that you can use on this board. There is Tina Linux, Debian, and Android 10. I'll post the link to the downloads page below in the description, but I imagine that most people will be using the Debian image, and that's the one I had the best experience with anyway. With my MangoPi MQ-QUAD loaded up, it's now time for some benchmarks. When testing the MQ-QUAD against the Raspberry Pi Zero, I booted the Debian image into a console, so there was no GUI taking up extra resources to get as close to a Raspbian Lite installation on the Pi Zero. If you want to do this, you can use a simple command sudo systemctl set default multiuser.target in the terminal, and then reboot the MangoPi MQ-QUAD, and this will boot you up into the terminal every time. If you do want to reverse this, then you can use the same command, but with graphical.target, and then reboot back into the graphical interface. To justify the decision to compare the MQ-QUAD to the latest Raspberry Pi Zero version, the 2, as opposed to the original, let's just take a quick look at their CPU performance side by side. In SmallPT, we see that the Zero 2 and MQ-QUAD are miles ahead of the original Zero, as well as the RISC-V powered MQ Pro. In this benchmark, the MQ-QUAD actually beats out the Zero 2 by about 12%. It's a similar story in a GZIP file compression benchmark, where the MQ-QUAD is 15% faster than the Pi Zero 2. In Coremark, the MQ-QUAD scores about 30% higher than the Zero 2. In PHPbench, the MQ-QUAD is almost twice as fast as the Zero 2, and the Pi is absolutely demolished in OpenSSL. Finally, in TinyMemBench, the Zero 2 actually beats out the MQ-QUAD in the memcopy operations by 35%, but then the MQ-QUAD returns to winning in memset operations by about another 35%. Overall, this is a pretty staggering win for the MangoPi MQ-QUAD, even with the same 4 cores. The higher clock speed of the H616 and the more RAM, 1GB compared with half a gig, is obviously paying off in spades here. It should be noted that the DDR3 RAM on the MQ-QUAD is faster than the LPDDR2 on the RP3A0 package, although the RAM being physically mounted on top of the processor on the Raspberry Pi chips is likely to have some advantages over the separate RAM packages on the MQ-QUAD. Anyway, these benchmark victories are not small numbers, and it actually gets more interesting when we look at power consumption. To measure power consumption, both boards were connected to the same monitor, USB keyboard, and USB Ethernet adapter with Wi-Fi on but not connected. I feel this represents a fairly standard use case. Whilst idle, just looking at a blinking empty terminal, the Raspberry Pi Zero 2 drew an average of 140 mA, which is about 0.7 watts, and the MQ-QUAD drew a more substantial 197 mA, or nearly 1 watt. However, when under peak load in our benchmarking, the Zero 2 hit 511 mA, or about 2.5 watts, and the MQ-QUAD topped out at 433 mA, or 2.17 watts, whilst handily beating the Zero 2 in pretty much every benchmark. So I think it's time for a few conclusions. I think that the MQ-QUAD is a great little board to play around with. It is more powerful than the Zero 2, and quite often draws less power. I think this board is a proper alternative to the Raspberry Pi Zero 2. At the time of this review, it's probably only possible to get your hands on the MQ-QUAD, so I think it is a great option. The software support and general community is obviously not as deep as the Raspberry Pi, but you should be able to do anything you would with the Raspberry Pi Zero on this board. I definitely recommend picking one up to have a tinker with if you can get it around the £25 price tag with reasonable shipping. I think that's a great deal, and it's good to have some options whilst we wait for Raspberry Pis to slowly come back into stock. Although with the performance of this board, I'll certainly continue to use it going forwards. If you have any requests for boards that you would like to be reviewed, then do let us know down in the comments. Be sure to let us know what you think of the MQ-QUAD. If you found this video interesting, then please be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a nice day.